Well, we have the honor and privilege of having one of my favorite people as our guest in this segment. I'm talking about Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Dr. Jasser is a physician. He's a noted commentator on Islamists and the threat that Islamists pose to Western civilization and to America. He's testified before our good friend, Congressman Peter King, who is chairman of the Homeland Security Committee. He's testified before the Judiciary Committee in the House. He's been a commentator on Fox and other radio and TV networks. And he's a man of courage, and he's a man of faith. He's a practicing Muslim, and he understands the concerns and the threats of Islamist hegemonic ambitions and their intolerance for other groups. Welcome to the show, Dr. Jasser. We're delighted to have you.
Oh, it's an honor to be with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I see this, and this is my view, I see this Islamist threat as being a worldwide threat that's based in some religious tracks, based in some political tracks. It's a mindset. It's almost a pathology. And I'm very, very concerned that people do not recognize the nature of the threat and what must be done to eliminate it. And I don't use the word contain it. I mean eliminate it. What are your thoughts, Doctor?
Well, I think now as we enter, this election season in 26, I can, as you mentioned, Peter King, back when I was testifying to Congress in 2011, I was telling them, listen, I'm a doctor. I don't just treat symptoms, I treat diseases. And the disease with radical Islam is a faith that needs to be reformed, that needs to come to terms with Westernism, with liberalism, freedom and liberty, and has not gone through an enlightenment process to separate mosque and state, and is still based in theocracy. But I said, listen, Muslims are barely 1% of the population in America, and you don't have to really be concerned about just Muslims. If you're concerned about America, it's not about Muslims taking over 350 million people. It's about a movement taking over the left, about taking over a political movement that it works with globally. And I said, my family escaped Syria, and the Marxist jihadists were working together in each of these countries, and you had the horseshoe effect, where the far left became the far right, and whether it's Saddam Hussein or the Assads of Syria or the Nassers of Egypt, each of these dictatorships slowly, and you saw in Iran, the revolution that pushed away the dictatorship was all about bringing faith back, but it quickly became even worse than the Shah was, because it was about political Islam and Islamism and hegemonic takeover of the Middle East and Muslim-majority countries. And now we see that we've come full circle. The left is becoming more and more radicalized. The Black Lives Matter movement basically countenance violence, destruction of federal property. You see socialism taking over healthcare. As a doctor, I see now 20% of the American economy taken over by the government, no price elasticity. The reason the American economy is unaffordable for most Americans trying to live the American dream is because of how much they're losing money on insurance. We pay for healthcare 7 times between Medicare, Medicaid taxes, your insurance premiums, your copays. It's absurd. And, that's just a little bit of a narrative of why we are where we are, where a whole party now is being taken over by entities that are anti-American, that are woke and have weaponized identity politics against the very essence of what it means to be American.
Well, I just want to point out to our listeners, and I'll turn over to Eric and to Jesse, that you are a candidate in Arizona for the United States House of Representatives in the 4th District. And it's very, very important that somebody with common sense, a moderate disposition and viewpoint coming out of the Muslim community, you would probably be the only, as far as I know, the only Muslim American in the Congress who actually expresses these views, because the other ones seem to be totally very radical left. So if people want to support, just for our record, if they want to support your candidacy in Arizona for the 4th Congressional District, how would they do that, Doctor?
Yeah, we would be so indebted if people could go to Z4AZ, just Z4AZ.com, and I can hit the ground running to prosecute the case to defend this country in our 250th anniversary, get past the identity politics and immediately, become Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib's, and the new, Adam Hamawi coming from New Jersey, all these radical Islamists and the socialists, I'll be their biggest nightmare. So z4az.com.
Thank you. Eric.
Yeah, so Doctor, welcome to the show. So when we get together in our family, I'm an American Jew. We get together in our family and we talk some politics, which frequently degenerates and then we stop. But sometimes when, other Jews like Bernie Sanders' names come up, it makes my head explode, make me want to vomit. And then there's some people in the family who say, hey, he's not so terrible. Bernie's okay. Socialist, so what? I'm just curious. And in your family, when you get together and you're talking politics and the issues of fellow Muslims come up, I mean, is it the same kind of dynamic?
Well, the Muslim narrative, in my family, I think it is, and that my grandfather was a politician who was in and out of house arrest in Syria, Zuhdi Jasser, my dad's dad. My mom's dad was a Sharia court judge in Syria who really tried to be a reformer. His daughters were taught to choose on their own whether to wear the hijab or not and how conservative or liberal to be in their faith. So I was blessed to come from two families that were quite educated and westernized. My dad was educated in London and his father was westernized in his thinking. So a lot of the ideas, the translation of the Quran that I got, from my dad is the one that really is different. It's very modernized. So that's a blessing. The vast majority of Muslims have not gone through, though, this modernization of liberal thinking where the scripture is not just black and white. There's ways to interpret it in a more modern way, that you can separate your political identity from your religious identity. You can believe in a national identity that has core beliefs that share things in common where you disagree with the role of government and economics, such as free markets versus government-run economy, or a national defense that's more of a security posture versus just a more open borders posture, or whatever it might be. Those things, the Muslim consciousness right now, if you look at most Muslim majority countries, their identities tied to their national identities, tied to their faith. It's tied to the legal systems, tied to Sharia, etc. So that needs some deep-seated reform, but the West needs to take sides in this thing. And within our families, we have this debate. My wife and my kids and I are demonized by the tribalism. I wrote a book called A Battle for the Soul of Islam. There's a whole chapter I wrote on tribalism where, rather than deal with the issues that I bring up, most people say, oh, I'm a Zionist agent. I'm some type of conspiracy theory. And they don't want to deal with the fact that actually I'm pretty devoted to God and pretty orthodox in my beliefs, but yet I reject the orthodoxy, the leadership. I reject the leaders of our faith and the clerics and what they interpret, as many reformers have in history. And this whole country was founded on folks that rejected theocracy, and it took Christianity and Christendom, 1789 years till you had a legalized system that did render unto Caesar what is Caesar and unto God's what is God. So, this is really where so many in the Muslim community are right now, is they say, oh, let somebody else do that hard work. And I tell them, well, you're sitting here in the lap of freedom, and we can do things in this country that you just can't do in the countries you escaped because of the regimes, and you have a moral responsibility to do it while you're here, not just sort of accept the freedom you have here because Judaism and Christianity have gone through modernization and Reformation and Enlightenment, and our faith has not. So, wake up, or you're going to become like the silent Germans who allowed Nazism to destroy their own national identity. And right now, all these Islamic republics from Pakistan to Iran to Saudi Arabia are just what they are because most Muslims have been asleep at the wheel.
And the Palestinian issue, is that strictly a political issue? Is that a religious issue? It is a political religious issue? I mean, it's an animating issue for a vast number of Muslims. I mean, New York's mayor, Zohran Mamdani, it's the centerpiece of his life. There's never been a Palestine. There's never, not now nor in history. And yet they're talking about free Palestine. You can't free something that's never existed. But I'm just wondering, in the radical Islamic Muslims' mind, do they see that as a religious issue or do they see that as a political issue?
It's funny that the further you get from Israel, the more radicalized Muslims are about the Palestinian issue. Why? Because they're not grounded in reality. I visited Israel 3 times and was just struck by the Muslim population. That's 1 million Muslims within the country of Israel that have their own Sharia courts, that have their own systems and freedoms that they don't have in any Muslim majority country. And yet, and their narrative about the Palestinian issue is about a community that is hijacked by the Hamas, next the Muslim Brotherhood movement, and they say, listen, they've never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity, as Golda Meir has said back in the last century. And the Palestinian national identity is primarily a national identity issue, but it's hijacked by radical Islamic movements in order to radicalize communities, Muslim communities, into the classic anti-Semitic and anti-Semitism of, theological discourse in Islam and Al Jazeera and other countries. That's why Qatar has such a deep responsibility in radicalizing Muslims. Is there 60 million Arabs that watch Al Jazeera? I remember our organization back 6-7 years ago outed one of their anchors for showing a Holocaust denial video that was a story they put out. They tried to remove it within 12 hours. We had it posted, and Facebook did not take it down despite Qatar wanting us to, and basically exposed that they're part of the radicalization process of the anti-Semitism that is just rampant in the Muslim majority world. So Israel becomes a target, and that's why anti-Zionism can't be separated from anti-Semitism, because it is deeply wedded to it in the Muslim consciousness, the Islamist consciousness, and that's why Islamism is a national identity. And to them, the easiest way to get more followers for political Islamic states is to say, well, we have to create something against the other religious states like Israel, etc. So that is a fictitious entity for them, and it's fabricated and radicalized, and yet it's a secular liberal state. It's not a theocratic state to anyone who's ever visited Israel. So that's really the utility of it for radicalization in the Muslim community.
Well, it seems to me that people need to know about you because you're the president founder of a group called American Islamic Forum for Democracy, which fights against these groups that are organized here within the United States, which are really, for example, CARE is a group that you've challenged, and it's challenged you for legitimacy as a spokesperson. It's very, very important that the American people and, frankly, the Western civilizations understand what a threat this is, because this is a unity of government and religion with no tolerance at all, as we know in the constitutional republic, of freedom of speech, or freedom of association, freedom of thought, political views. There's no tolerance for that, and that's a real problem. And your leadership is absolutely essential. Jesse, your turn.
Dr. Jasser, thank you for joining us. And I just want to touch base with you. And number one, my voice, along with millions of common sense Americans throughout the country, our hope that the good friends and people of Arizona send you to Congress so we could have another patriot like yourself fighting for our value, for our common values and such. And in doing that, I noticed that you mentioned a couple of things regarding Islamic groups and radicalization. We've seen that here in the United States. We've seen that unfortunately by elected officials on the Democrat side, which you enumerated when we spoke to Judge Weinberg and Eric Levine. But in terms of how they become radicalized, and in doing so, I guess my question is in two parts. Obviously they're radicalized, perhaps in their countries of origin and such, and then we're able. Have you seen it now radicalized here in America for two ways? Because they were radicalized in their home country, and they are open borders here for about 4.5 years under President Biden, where people were able to come in here unchecked and continue their radicalization of these communities. The other part is that very dark money. The dark money of those special interests that want to continue to radicalize and sow violence. In your examinations of this radicalization. Have you seen those two issues? Because one of the things that we have contended and we spoke about here on this show on numerous occasions is the fact that you just look at Europe. Their open border system, the EU system of immigration or lack of immigration, has basically allowed radicalized Muslims and others to basically come in and try to change the European culture.
Yeah, I could not agree more in that the entities, what the Islamists, when they work hand in glove with the Marxists across the world, whether it's the Chinas of the world, the funders, the Soroses of the world that want to destroy the Western American exceptionalism, if you will. And that's why in the launch of my general campaign now next month, we're going to have a series of speeches that I'm going to give about the beauty of the American dream, that America at its 250th. What are we fighting for? What are we trying to save? Because our kids, and in the future, my kids' kids, we're one generation away from losing this country because foreign entities, we are the greatest threat to liberty globally, the greatest threat to liberty growing, if you will, globally against the Chinese, against the Russians, and into places like Ukraine and elsewhere, because the ideas, if the youth of those countries embrace our freedom and American exceptionalism, it will put those dictators on their heels and decimate them. So that money is flowing from the Qatars and the Turkeys of the world because they want to control their societies. And the fellow travelers of Marxism, communism, and Islamism or jihadism see us as the greatest threat. So it's through, and the radicalization, the fertile soil for it is actually the moral inversion. You saw after October 7, our universities, and you see who's supporting the Abdul Sayyids of the world. This is not, actually most of the African-American community and the racial minorities are not. It's the affluent, white, spoiled kids who really don't have a grounding in their education and understanding freedom and haven't really lifted themselves up by their bootstraps and don't even know the difference between an Italian flag and a Palestinian flag, and yet they are demonstrating against the Jews and against Israel because they want a cause to die for. And actually, that's the if you look at Eric Hoffer's book on the True Believer, what creates causes that people want to die for? The jihadists create a cause that's about the end of times. The socialists, the communists create a cause, and you look at Hassan Piker, radicalizes millions through his gaming platform, wears a uniform of Mao Zedong, and goes and tells them that he's a great leader. 90% of them haven't done any homework to know that he's killed tens of millions of people and is just a genocidal, abhorrent human being in history. And yet that sells because they hate America. They hate their families and what they are more than anything of understanding the individualism and what freedom should be. So this is why, it's so important. If you look at the district I'm in, the congressman that's there, Congressman Stanton's been there 5 terms. He's done nothing. It's a split district in that he barely has a 3-point advantage, but he's never had a real challenger, previous Phoenix mayor, and yet he sat by him. He has done nothing to fight the anti-Semitism and radicalism in the Democrat Party. He just fought off a DSA candidate, and that DSA candidate, he said, he destroyed him because he beat him by 30%. Well, it's a very independent district, and Arizonans is really why the DSA candidate lost, not because of this weak, empty-suited Democrat. So we have to find out what are the principles that bring us together, those 80-20 principles, and that's how we counter radicalization. And we have to stand for what's moral in society. As de Tocqueville said about America, he said, democracy functioned the best in America because it's a religious society, Judeo-Christian society based in morality. We are losing our morality, and that's what creates radicalization. And that's why you need devout Muslims to fight radical Islam, because the atheists that are leaving their faith in Iran, God bless them for doing that, because the theocrats are horrible, but they're not going to be able to take back their faith if they leave it. So this is why we need to have moral folks leading the cause, if you will.
Well, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, it's been an honor and a privilege to have you on Let the Record Show. On behalf of Chairman Garcia and Eric Levine and myself, We wish you every good wish. I think this campaign in your race for Congress is probably one of the most important congressional races in the history of America, frankly. I think your victory will be a voice for reason, for common sense, and the future of America. We look forward, as the campaign unfolds, to have you back with us. And thank you very much for being with us. And as always, God bless your families. God bless America. And let's hope that the future of America can be bright for another 250 years. And because of people like you, Dr. Jasser, I'm confident we have a good chance. Thanks again for joining us.